Welcome to the AHEAD Partner Series. My name is Felix Vargas. I am the Director of Security Specialist Solutions Engineering at AHEAD. I also lead the AHEAD Security Go-to-Market. Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that I am very, very passionate about, AI security. And with me, I have a perfect counterpart to discuss this topic. I am joined by Daryan Dehghanpisheh, who is the North America Go-to-Market Leader for AI security at Palo Alto Networks. Daryan has spent many years in security, has deep expertise in not only the standards, the secure architectures, and the response mechanisms for AI security. So welcome to the podcast, Daryan. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. And as we head into the holiday season and the end of 2025, it's been an exciting year in this space. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it.
Excellent, Daryan. So give me a bit about your background, right? What have
Yeah.
you been up to the last few years? Where does this passion for AI security come from?
Well, it actually comes. Well, let's start midway through the story, which
Okay.
is myself and two co-founders, Ian Swanson and Badr Ahmad. We started the industry leader in this space named Protect AI, and Protect AI was acquired by Palo Alto Networks in this year. So as I said, the market has undergone a massive shift. We were the biggest acquisition, and we were the most robust platform in the market. We're now a part of Palo Alto Networks, where myself, my co-founders, are very talented colleagues, have taken the best of the Palo Alto Networks capabilities, taken the best of our intellectual property and understanding of artificial intelligence, machine learning models, and the way in which you can secure them confidently, and released to the market this product, leadership product, covering everything from third-party agents, first-party MCP scanning, all the way to runtime security, called Prisma AIRS 2.0. But the passion for this came when the co-founders, who we were at AWS and Oracle, building and marketing and getting to market these $1 billion of AI services long before the era of GPTs and the era of chat GPT or large language models or LLMs. Um, when people were just building predictive artificial intelligence solutions for common use cases that had been around since 2014. And they were deploying those services and deploying those stacks, and there were security gaps. And we realized that you needed to go kind of have a new approach with new tooling and capabilities as this transition was going to happen towards artificial intelligence everywhere, right? And then came, this notion of large language models, consumer-driven approaches, and as a result, between 2022 and now, here we sit where AI is everywhere. It's critical to the economy. It's critical to national security. It's critical in everyday lives. It's a social mechanism, and people want security, safety, and governance around that. And so we're fortunate to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you about this today.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I would say the innovation is just very rapid. For the first time in my career, when you go to a meeting, the conversations that you're having can severely fluctuate between last week and the next week because of how fast things are moving. So I couldn't agree more. So going back a little bit, to your history, can you give me some perspective at, when you got into technology as a whole, right? What is Dee's backstory or your origin story from a tech perspective? Where does that begin?
Yeah, my origin story was in a small town in Idaho. I had a science teacher when I was 17. I started my first company, and that was actually, I can't believe this, the dawn of the web, right? So to
Oh,
put it in
wow.
perspective, this is when Netscape was going public. I started my first company then, and I owe it to a guy named Mike Gantz. Take a moment to all those teachers out there. You do make a difference in somebody's life. Anyways, my love affair and marriage to technology has been long and deep, and we've just kind of been through every transition that you could think of, from the internet to the web, two different things, to e-commerce, to client server, mobile, from mobile to cloud, cloud to microservices, microservices to AI models as platforms, and now, you know, generative AI tool abstraction. So we've been on that journey, and you hit on something, Felix, that I think is really interesting. This is the first time in my career, going back all the way to the age of 17, I'm an old guy now, where nobody is saying no or we won't. And I'm holding an iPhone, right? Remember when
Mhm.
everybody said
Right.
iPhones wouldn't be in the enterprise and everybody was carrying around Blackberries? That didn't
That's right.
happen, right? Like nobody's carrying a BlackBerry anymore. Or how many people still say, you know what, we're not going to go to the cloud?
Right.
It's a debatable thing. AI is the first technology transition where there is no debate. Nobody's saying no, and nobody's saying we won't. They're asking two questions: how fast and how do we? How fast do we go, and how do we do this securely governed, regulated, whatever term you want to put in there? So it is the only technology transition that I've seen that has all of what I call Maslow's hierarchy of enterprise needs: fear, greed, and regulation. And so that is creating this very almost terraform like process, right? Where we are seeing the ground shift and the landscape shift on an almost daily basis.
I love the teacher call out, by the way. We don't mention the influence that teachers have. I started my career working at a school system for 10 years. I was help desk all the way to network admin. So teachers are near and dear to my heart. So that's awesome. And I couldn't, agree more with where the industry is going and what we're seeing. I think I always tell my team, AI is not going to replace you. Somebody using it will. And that's true for us as individuals and also for organizations. So innovation and adopting the technology is something that we are all tasked with. So I couldn't agree more. So
Yeah,
let's
I have an interesting comment on that, which is that I like to tell people if you're good at your job, AI is going to make you great at your job. If you're bad
exactly.
at your job, AI will replace you.
I love that perspective, and I couldn't agree more. It's just going to augment,
That's
the
right.
good things that you do, and make you more effective and efficient at performing tasks. So aligned. All right, so let's just zoom out a little bit, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot happening in this space, right? And before we get into security, I want to sort of discuss the 100,000 foot view, right? Which is what I call AI literacy, right? And the industry sort of tasked with solving for. But lots of efforts around educating folks on AI prompts, how to develop proper prompts to get the output that you need. So, from your vantage point, what are the biggest opportunities organizations have as far as use cases around AI adoption? And also, what are some of the barriers that you're seeing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think of the opportunities and the barriers as almost two ends of a horseshoe, right? Which they're very, very close together. But let's start with the opportunities and how we think about those opportunities at Palo Alto Networks, and then correlate that to the barriers. So Palo Alto Networks, when we talk about AI security or security for AI, really kind of comes in two flavors. I'll call it three, but we're going to talk about two today. The first is what I call democratized AI. Democratized AI are the things that are just happening with or without the enterprise awareness, with or without the enterprise saying, yes, we want this, no, we don't. And in a lot of ways, this reminds me of kind of 2007 when enterprises were quick to say, well, we'll just block Facebook, we'll block Twitter. That didn't work out too well. So if the assumption is that you're going to somehow prevent employees and workers of all tenure, of all experience levels, of all roles and
Mhm.
levels in the organization from using AI, you're a fool, very simply. So the notion of, and again, going back to if you're good at your job, AI is going to make you great at your job. If
Mhm.
you're not good at your job, AI is going to replace you. And there's no better frame of reference for that than to say, your employees are using AI in their daily lives, and if they're not, they should be.
So, the question on that,
Yeah,
there are degrees of AI adoption. What are you
yeah.
seeing as far as basic use cases versus more advanced use cases as far as the general population is
So
concerned?
let's talk about that in a second because I think that there's a fine line, and that again, that horseshoe thing is on the second side of that. So if we talk about this notion of democratized AI, which is the stuff that I am going to use, whether my employer tells me I can or
Right.
can't, is irrelevant. I'm going to use that in my daily life. Is the opposite side of democratized AI from our perspective is enterprise sanctioned AI.
Right.
And enterprise sanctioned AI is the stuff that an enterprise can shape, right? It's going to determine what I buy. what I rent, and what I build from an artificial intelligence perspective. And so let's take a simple use case that exists in both domains, right? And it's question answering. That's the most basic one, right? Whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, like Perplexity, doesn't matter, right? When you think about searching and it's being replaced with kind of questioning, if you will, and engagement, what you're doing in your personal life of asking ChatGPT for something or a competitor, instead of searching on Google for something, you even see how Google's changing the search results, right? It used to be SEO, now it's GEO, right? On that side. It's the same thing for when you're in your enterprise. You want to be able to ask a question of the enterprise systems to get you an answer that is more capable so you can do your job more effectively. So in the democratized AI case, it's just simply asking a question for the purpose of organizing your life, per se. And in the enterprise, it's asking a similar type of question to a similar type of system, but making it so that you're more effective and more efficient in your work. So their functional use cases revolve primarily around knowledge bases, like figuring out things, and planning, whether it's planning a project or a response or a presentation, or whether it's planning what my kid's route to soccer should be and what kind of things I should bring for the team because I'm on snack duty, right? Like, if you think about planning as a use case, and again, I'm not trying to be too high level about this, but these are real day, everyday things that exist in both. Now, the difference here is that when you think of security and governance of that, what you do in your personal life may not be as governed, arguably may or may not be more or less secure, but the enterprise has to govern it. If you work in a regulated industry, guess what? You're going to have to get that logged. If you have access to sensitive information, let's say you work in finance or you work in healthcare or you work somewhere else like that people in your teams need to control who has access to what information, that's going to be regulated and governed, right? So the horseshoe of opportunities and barriers are really, really close. Because in your personal life, you probably want to know what the heck that AI company is doing. And in your enterprise life, those people need to absolutely know how secure their data is, just as a simple example, right? So the barriers to adoption on the personal side are kind of like I have to get used to a new frame of reference, but social norms change very quickly. However, on the enterprise side, where the barriers to adoption are is literacy and education, rules of the road, right? It took us forever to come up with a rational social media policy for employees. And now it's basically summarized this way: good, bad, but not ugly. You can say good things, you say bad things, just don't be ugly on what you do. Like, we probably need to have a similar type of thing for that. And what I find interesting is that employers all over, I think you'd be hard pressed to find an employer today who doesn't have a social media policy in their employment agreement.
Mm-hmm.
How many of them have generative AI policies in their agreement?
Probably not many.
Exactly. Right. So when you think about those types of things, whether it's regulatory employment agreements or security of the systems themselves, those are primarily the barriers to adoption, right? And it's the typical things. How do I keep it secure? How do I keep my employees protected and my data and my assets and my infrastructure protected? And then if it's needing to be governed, whether it's AI at the state level or it's, preventing NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical prompts and responses in a government space, like you have to really think through that. So the barriers to adoption are the same barriers to adoption we've always had: security, safety, and governance.
Couldn't agree more. And that's a perfect segue. So at Ahead, we look at AI and security in two buckets. The first is security for AI, which most of this conversation will be around. And the second is AI for security, which is using AI to augment our security
AI in the SOC
response.
is how we call it. Yeah.
Exactly. AI in the SOC, right? So we all call it differently, but it's the same sort of concept. And within security for AI, there are three perspectives. One is AI governance. The second one is secure architectures. And the third is an AI aware SOC. So if you look at the governance element, there are big G and little g responsibilities, right? Big G, big governance is an organization's perspective on how they're going to use AI. Whether it's responsible use, whether it's third-party risk assessments, whether it's data governance, which is an organizational element, and then there's the little g pieces, which are the standards. Those standards are critical to secure AI investments, right? And so what we're seeing is we're moving rapidly as far as innovation is concerned without first threat modeling, I guess, against those standards, against those innovations, which would dictate what controls we need to put in place. And once the controls are in place, we need to make sure that the SOC is aware of the controls and can detect these advanced threats that are happening. And if we dive deeper into this concept of secure AI architectures that we're positioning here, there are levels to this, right? Because you have a model, and part of the controls that we need to put in place is preventing questions to be asked of the model that shouldn't be asked, right? So there's an element of a control on the front end, right? Think of it like an LLM firewall or, an AI firewall. And then on the back end, there are elements around response protections where the model itself should be trained, right? Not to respond in certain ways, but we should also inspect, those responses because if they're not allowed and they're not in line with corporate policy, we shouldn't allow them. Right? Can you elaborate a bit on that? Right?
Yeah.
The controls on the front end, the controls between the model and all the different data sources, and then the response element. How do you see that?
Look, I think that it's this is what we call runtime protection, and runtime protection involves a lot of things, such as understanding, what you framed it in a very interesting way, which is what should be asked, right? Imagine if we put that governance on employees. Right. Certain questions you can't ask. Really? Well, it probably depends on who you are. So the way I look at this is not necessarily just about what should be asked or what response should not be given. It's really about who, in addition to the what and the why, needs to be analyzed, right? So a CFO should be able to ask anything they want and not have any response blocked when it comes to the context of the company's financial operations.
100%, yes.
Right?
Yep.
But an intern should not.
Should not.
So when we think about this, we think about permissions, we think about identities, rights, roles, and privileges, access mechanisms, what the model is doing and what the model should have as a response to Felix, the CFO, versus Felix, the intern. Is right. Very different. Now, that doesn't mean that I prevent the prompt or I prevent the response. It means based on the context I prevented, based on all the other information I have, not just about that question or answer. So why do I bring this up? I bring this up because security as, security and policy as code is really how you have to think about this for runtime protection. And it gets even more interesting when you start talking about agents and reasoning models and all the assets that are there. Today, we talk about model files or prompts and responses. Tomorrow, actually today even, we're talking about MCP agents, A to A agents. We're talking about what those things do, the reasoning mechanisms, which brings me back to say your example of AI in the SOC. If you have an agent in your SOC and it does something, you can bet what, that you're going to want to look in to understand how that agent makes decisions and why.
Sure.
Right? So when we think of runtime security, we think of runtime security as full context of what do you as a company want to allow, for who, under what circumstances, and how do you do that in as real time as possible?
Yeah, and if you look at, the example that you gave is a really good one. You have the CFO, you have a different individual within the organization. They have different permissions, right? And those are internal resources accessing an LLM or an AI application, and there are data sources that are behind these LLMs. And part of the challenge that we're seeing is data governance hasn't really been solved for. So the question that I often get is, we haven't really solved comprehensively for data governance. We have a policy, but we haven't inventoried, we haven't classified, we haven't tagged comprehensively. Maybe we have for some regulatory compliance reason, but not for the AI use case, which is more comprehensive in nature. And the question is, should we go back and do a comprehensive data governance assessment and tagging and And I think it's a very big initiative when we sort of focus on the broad terms to solve for an AI use case. So we often say there's a pragmatic approach here, right? Where what is the use case? What are you looking to solve for? And let's sort of shift left and understand that and make sure that only the right folks have access to it. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I do. I was with the CISO of one of the top 3 banks in the world, and we were over coffee. We were talking about like how to think about a new framework. And in security, we typically have thought of like shift left and govern right. You know, and we came up with this notion of AI security is more like a bow tie, right? So your shift left, when you think about it, is really broad when it talks about trading assets and RAG patterns and like all those things. And then as it comes into a user, that user, the person or the agent, by the way, right? Because agents become more like humans that are super capable than they are technology assets that are very deterministic. As they come into that human and that human then does things with it on the right hand side, you want to have an even more expansive scope because that comes the other direction. Let's go back to that question, like who should ask what and what should be allowed. It's really interesting because leaders are always wanting to know, well, what do our employees think? What questions are they asking? How many times have we met with large enterprises, Felix, where they're like, if I just knew really what was on my employees' minds, there's probably no better way than to understand what they're asking your internal agents or your internal chatbots. And so you don't want to block that necessarily. You want to catalog it, but you want to monitor it. In that case, you might want to just monitor the response. Right?
Sure.
But you might want to block a prompt if somebody put an attachment in there. Right? So is that attachment part of your data governance or is it part of model security?
Yeah. And I would say there's 2 perspectives here. One is blocking a prompt that is being asked from an outside individual, right? Someone that is outside of the organization that is looking to, ask a bunch of questions that they shouldn't be asking. And then the other, which in that case, there are controls that we obviously need to put in place to prevent jailbreaking, prompt injection, et cetera. Then there is this discussion that we're having around internally, right? So there is an internal element, right, around permissions and making sure that you have access, again, to the data governance piece. And both of those, although they're somewhat aligned, to your point, should be treated differently, right? Because we want the insights of what the end user is asking so that we can improve the information that is available to them. So it's a difficult balance, right, between those 2.
Yes, it is. And, that's why I think when we talk about it, we talk about a secure AI by design framework, right? And when you think about a secure AI by design framework, it's one of those situations where, going back to what I said, you have democratized AI and then you have like enterprise sanctioned AI. In the democratized AI world and in the democratized AI, which is the AI your employees are going to use whether you like it or not, and the enterprise sanctioned, they both have one thing in common from a secure AI by design perspective, and that's discovery. Do I know what people are doing? Do I see everything that I have? But for the enterprise sanctioned AI, which is where I spend my time, you're really talking about, okay, discovery, then risk assessment, and then protection, right? And by kind of lumping them into those buckets, it allows us to have a much more structured and conversation that also unlocks specific actions that people can take. Because as an example, one of the things that, we're guilty of it as well at Protect AI prior to coming to Palo was the industry embraced this term AI red teaming. Yes. And a lot of what those tools do is not red teaming. I'll give you an example. If I'm using it to understand the inference benchmark performance around security of multiple vendors, is that really red teaming? No. It's a benchmark tool. It's a benchmarking tool. Is it a red teaming action? Not really. Because, okay, well, they'll say, oh, but you're asking prompts and responses and this and that. It's like, but I don't know that that's red teaming. Most offensive security professionals would be like, red teaming is really kind of looking at the API mechanisms, the infrastructure stacks, all the things that hits. And it's like, yes, that's why I'm saying it's a part of an assessment capability.
Right.
Right. But that same tool, that same red teaming tool, which isn't used for red teaming in this case,
Right.
in our world, you can use that tool as almost a dynamic scanner on that AI endpoint, monitoring things, in which case it's not red teaming, it's a protection mechanism, right around to kind of like a mini perimeter and looking at like capabilities there. So I just think that this is an area where traditional security, governance, data mechanisms, all the things that we've been talking about, we have to kind of morph our terms a little, right? Of what those things mean. And from our perspective, when we think about how to answer the questions that you just framed, and the thing I love about Ahead is that you guys are ahead of the industry in terms of how you guys have been thinking about this. And we love collaborating with you on this. And this is why, because when you talk about the risk assessment, we start with discovery and risk assessment. Why? Because you can't fix what you can't see and you can't patch what you don't know has holes. So if I know those two things, then I can go into protection and I can understand what are the things that I need to go do.
I couldn't agree more. And, I have one question, around shadow AI, but before I get to that, I'm completely aligned on the red teaming element, and we're using that term loosely. Red teaming
And incorrectly.
and incorrectly. So I've talked to, I don't know, 10 plus different startups around this, and everyone's calling it red teaming. And really what we're doing is automating questions that are being asked of these models. And there
automated
are
testing. That's what it is.
It's automated testing,
testing.
but a lot of it is not really a security issue. Like some of it is not security related, right? If I'm asking a question repeatedly and then the question deviates, hey, that's a problem, that becomes an application issue, right? And whoever owns that application needs to go review it. So I agree that the red teaming element is sort of misaligned. Within secure AI secure architectures at Ahead, we look at not only asset inventory, to your point, right? Discovery of all the use cases. We also look at the, protections, right? The guard railing that we would sort of put in place. And then even though, I'm not aligned with the term, we also look at red teaming, right? And say, hey, you need to continuously ask, and validate, that the questions that, the answers that you're expecting are the answers that are given. Going to the asset inventory piece, there is this, sort of evolution of agentic workflows, right? So there are non-agentic runtimes, there are agentic runtimes. And as we're discovering, obviously we want to discover all runtimes. You can't protect what you can't see, to your point, right? How are you sort of seeing the agentic runtime discovery, right? Is that more of a challenge? Because a lot of the perspectives that I see is it's very easy to discover non-agentic runtimes, and the statistics show that for every one employee there are 2 agentic runtimes within an organization, right? So how well do you believe organizations are discovering agentic runtimes versus
well,
non-agentic?
Today I think they're not doing it well, right? That's why we're having this conversation. But I think that the question is like, do I have tools to do it well? And the answer is from Palo, yes. And this is not to be a shameless plug on Palo. This is where the Protect AI plus Palo leadership for agent security in particular is so critical. And we are so far ahead of everyone. Why am I so passionate about that? Because the adoption of agents is far outstripping the pace of adoption of Gen AI applications.
100%.
Why is that? Well, Gen AI makes content, agents make money. And so the reason those are being employed so quickly is for that simple rationale. But what you have to do in a Gen AI application from a security perspective and a discovery perspective pales in comparison to what you need to do for agent security and agent discovery, which brings me to your question, which is like, hey, how are you discovering what it does? And the way to think about that is, I think, go back to that security bow tie that I was talking about. I think the Gen AI application element is more like traditional SDLC security, right? Like we're going to put things in that monitor that there. But with agents, it's more akin to cloud security, because you need to think about what that agent has access to, its permissions, its identities, forensics, like soft permissions, like all kinds of things, right? So when you think about, say, how we have thought of cloud for a very long time in terms of like the least privileged access, right? Well, with agents, you kind of want to go think about least privileged action. What is the thing that that agent needs to be least privileged on, right? What can it do autonomously and what can it absolutely never do autonomously? Um, and so when you think about discovery of agents, it's models, it's assets, it's context protocols, it's like a whole bunch of things that you now have to look for and have telemetry on, which means you need sensors to pick that up at the network level, the stack level, the device level, the user level, the everything. Why do you think it is so powerful that Palo not only has Protect AI in its intellectual property suite, but is also doing things to evaluate what's the power of CyberArk? So now you have to see things that happen on the endpoints, on the user components, those permissions, a new set of permissions, new set of identities. Now I'm just not logging prompts and responses. I'm logging actions, RESTful state API calls, click streams, all to govern essentially three basic parameters: reads, writes, and public versus private, right? Those are the things
Right.
that I have to do for an agent. And those are the elements that I think Palo is doing yards, miles above anyone else right now. And if I can discover across those things, I can feed that in, understand exactly what those things are doing, those agents, who they belong to, who's in charge of managing the agent, what kind of permissions it needs to have, where there's an issue, where there's a gap. And then I can wrap the enforcement around that. Very similar to how we do cloud security. That's why I say Gen AI security is a lot more like SDLC security, kind of like a shift left concept. But when
Sure.
we think about agents, agent security and agent discovery is very similar to what we do for cloud and users.
Right. Discovering the agents, their permissibility, what they have access to. It's really the fundamentals of what we've been doing for a long time as it relates to security in the cloud. I couldn't be more aligned on that. Question for you. So Palo Alto is obviously a very strategic partner for Ahead, right? We're doing great things together.
We
We're going to
loved our
continue to
partnership
do
with you guys. Yeah,
great partnership, right? Which
phenomenal.
is why we're having this podcast and diving deeper into these topics. As you know, we're very passionate on AI security. We're very passionate on AI comprehensively. The acquisition of CyberArk, very strategic, embedding that into the security of AI conversation, very strategic as well. Tell me a bit about Prisma AIRS 2.0, right?
Yeah.
Obviously pre-acquisition of Protect AI, there were already capabilities there. Paula was leading in a lot of ways. This just makes it better, right? And so
Yeah.
can you give me what the vision is for, Prisma AIRS 2.0 and what the future holds for the platform?
Yeah. So the vision for Prisma AIRS 2.0 is that it is the central place for all things AI that needs to be secured, governed, and managed. Notice what I didn't say. I didn't say developed. And that's important because AI development needs to be able to continue at an almost unabated pace inside of these industry players and inside of these enterprises. And we don't want to be in a position where security or GRC teams or whatever, whoever they are kind of friction points to those development speed and capabilities. So the whole intention of the platform is to go into the background as much as possible so that we're not interrupting, and we're not interrupting your ability to go in and out of different models and different model providers, right? The AI is a great experimentation mechanism. So as a result, what the platform does now in terms of discovery, assessment, and protection as three very different but closely related capabilities, our ability to see everything across those assets, across your network, across those boundaries, north, south, east, west,
Mhm.
across clouds, providers, model provider, doesn't matter, and have an ability to act as a neutral party to understand the assessment through automated scanning, red
Right.
teaming, through SaaS, DaaS, SCI like capabilities for all AI assets, not just models, but MCP servers and reasoning mechanisms, all those things later. And then posture management by feeding those
Mhm.
elements in and understanding that, having that capability. And all these things exist now that our customers use it today across every industry, across every size of industry. They're using it today. We're going to be doing a big amount of business this year. It's going to be even bigger next year, as Ahead knows. But then there's protection, right? Which is runtime security of your Gen AI apps, your capabilities there, and AI agent security. And without going into all these features, the way I think about it is, hey, how do I take scanning, automated testing, posture management, policy as code mechanisms, and put that in context for Gen AI applications and agents, right? Whether first party, third party, whether those models and capabilities are given to you by Sam Altman or Sam data scientists, right? Whatever those capabilities are, Prisma AIRS today can do. And when you look out into the future, today we sit as that security bow tie as the central single pane of glass. But we're asking ourselves this question today, which is, okay, how soon until all software is AI software? Is it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? You've heard me say this with customers and with team members whenever I'm asked, hey, who's the chief AI officer? Who's the chief? Should we have a chief AI officer? Should we have a chief AI security officer? And I'm like, yeah. And they should report to whoever your chief electricity officer, or your chief electricity security officer reports to, because it's essentially going to be everywhere, which means we have to think about security of the AI components and the AI things in your software and in your tech stack in context for the user that matters. Because when you think about an AI right of boom problem, let's bring it back to where you opened with that Anthropic thing. Was it a security issue with the model, or was it an access issue? And
Access
who was
issue.
using it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so putting it in context for what matters of, hey, the AI security component has a problem for the network security person versus an AppSec person versus a GRC person versus a line of business person is very different. And so today, while AIRS is kind of that central pane of glass, tomorrow our capabilities from AIRS will be infused across all Palo's products.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In closing, first of all, I want to thank you, Dee, for joining. Right, I love the sort of candid approach to this conversation. The partnership with Palo Alto, like I mentioned, is very strategic to us. I think Palo is leading from the front as far as innovation via acquisition and organic innovation as well, which we're recognizing and which is fueling the partnership. What are your thoughts as far as what you see, from our partnership? But what do you value in, systems integrators partnering with, Palo Alto to evolve, the outcomes that your solutions promise?
What I love that Ahead has done has contextualized and broken down into very simple capabilities what enterprises can do today, right? And so the way in which the Ahead security framework for artificial intelligence applications and development has been brought to market is wonderful, because it has two really critical prescriptions on what you should be doing. And where we are aligned best is, hey, one, you can't fix what you can't see. So let's go help you discover and get that inventory. And then two, you can't fix what you don't know is broken, right? You can't plug the holes that you don't know exist. And so those assessment tools, red teaming, that capability is to bring that in as part of an assurance framework for customers is awesome, because every vendor under the sun, if you come in today and you're a startup or you're a big cloud, and your clients, your customers ask, well, how do you deploy? And they say, in the cloud, we're a SaaS company. They're going to say, cool, go fill out these 150 questions on how you do this. And then I'll grade the responses and then determine whether or not we're going to have another conversation.
100%.
We need the same thing for AI. And that's what that tool allows, right? That's what the framework that Ahead brings with the complementary tool from Prisma AIRS 2.0 for red teaming in this space allows people to answer the questions of, hey, any vendor that makes an AI claim against your AI assurance program allows you to know a whole lot more before that vendor comes in the door. So that's where I really, really love partnering with Ahead. And we thank you for your great partnership and your clients and customers. They couldn't be better served with two companies like us.
Awesome. Well, listen, thanks again for joining. Thank you for everyone that tuned in to listen to this episode. If you want to learn more, please go to the Palo Alto website, go to the Ahead website, go to our YouTube, LinkedIn. We're blasting content everywhere. We want to lead from the front and make sure we're connecting dots as far as, AI and everything, right, across the partner ecosystem Things are moving very rapidly. Just a couple takeaways from today. You can't secure what you can't see. Number one, if you don't have standards, you can't secure those investments. So once you understand what you have and what your crown jewel investments are as it relates to AI innovation, you have to do threat modeling to develop the standards so that you have an informed approach to how you secure those elements. You also need a risk assessment as part of that. So you understand what's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And then from that, if your SOC can't see these deployments, you're not going to be able to respond to them. So with that, Dee, thank you for your time. Thanks for everyone that tuned in, and we'll catch you all next time.
Thank you.